There comes a moment when you stand in front of the mirror and whisper to yourself, no more. No more pretending. No more making room for what slowly drains your spirit. No more letting people trespass through your boundaries like they never mattered. Because you are not fragile. You are not a doormat. You are not some broken story waiting to be rewritten by those who feed off your suffering. You've held on to pain like it was a purpose, but your life wasn't made for silent suffering. You weren't born to breathe life into what's already gone, to fan the flames of toxicity, or to sit quietly in the presence of those who make you question your own worth. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to say, this isn't love. This isn't respect. This isn't what I was created for. If they say you're too emotional, so be it. If they say you've changed, take it as proof that you've grown. Growth feels like betrayal to people who chose to remain the same, but you weren't meant to stay where your spirit is starving. So today, we're naming 6 behaviors that are never okay, non-negotiable, unacceptable, not from anyone, not even from yourself. You need to understand something. Disrespect doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it's in the quiet glances that cut you down. It's in the way they talk over you, the jokes that hide the jab, the tone that says you're not worth hearing. Many of us were raised to take it, to smile through the sting, to make ourselves smaller so others wouldn't feel uneasy. But silence isn't strength. It isn't calm. Sometimes, silence is where your dignity goes to die. Yes, it's hard to speak, especially when you've been taught to keep the peace, to avoid confrontation, to always be the bigger person. But silence in the face of repeated disrespect isn't maturity, it's self. You're training others in how to treat you. And the moment you let it slide once, they'll come back colder, sharper, more deliberate. You don't need to lash out, but you do need to be clear. Because when you finally draw that line, they'll realize it was always supposed to be there. The people who genuinely care about you, they won't test your limits to see how much you'll take. They won't wrap insults in laughter. They won't mock your dreams or roll their eyes at your growth. And that tightness in your chest when someone crosses the line, that's your soul speaking. That's the moment you recognize disrespect. But we've been trained to doubt that feeling, to swallow that truth, to gaslight ourselves into thinking, maybe I'm just overreacting. But ask yourself, how many it's not a big deal moments does it take to completely destroy something sacred? One act won't break you, but 1,000 tiny cuts will strip away your self-belief, your confidence, your core. You are allowed to say, I let it slide before, but never again. You owe that to the future version of you, the healed one, the whole one, the one who finally learns to protect her boundaries, not just survive through them. Speak up, not to start war, but to stop disappearing. This isn't about rage. It's about reclaiming your place. It's about walking into every room knowing you deserve to be there. Not because someone says so, but because your presence is enough. When someone crosses that line, they're not just testing a boundary, they're testing your worth. And if you keep biting your tongue, they'll assume you've given up the very ground you're standing on. But maybe that ground needs a shake. Maybe the storm in your voice is what finally clears the air. Let them feel the shift. Let them sit in the silence where your tolerance used to live. Because respect isn't a privilege, it's the baseline. And once people know you're done bending, they'll either rise to meet your standards or walk themselves out. Either way, you win. Because silence might keep things easy, but it costs you yourself. Disrespect wears many faces, the boss who talks over you like your voice is background noise, the partner who dismisses your feelings because you're too emotional, the friend who vanishes when you need them but shows up fast when they want something. And sometimes it's your own voice telling you to dim your light, so no one else feels uncomfortable. But the longer you sit in places where disrespect is disguised as normal, the easier it is to believe the lie that asking for basic human decency is asking too much, that being seen, heard, and valued is a burden. But that's the trap. That's how silence becomes your prison. Because when someone shows they don't honor your boundaries, you don't have to scream, but you do have to stand. You do have to say, I see this, I feel this, and I'm not pretending anymore. Because once you begin honoring your voice, the world starts listening. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it shakes things up. Yes, it might disrupt your fake peace. But real peace, it doesn't avoid the storm. It walks straight into it, with truth as its anchor. If someone treats you badly, let that truth rise. Let it rattle the walls, if it must. You weren't put here to stay silent at your own expense. You're here to be honest, even when it's inconvenient. And the ones who fed off your silence, they'll always label your honesty as a threat. Too much, too sensitive, too proud. That's their fear, not your flaw. Every time you stand against disrespect, you're telling your younger self, your growing self, your sacred self, I choose me. And that choice, that's where healing begins. That's where weak love, lazy apologies, and this is just who I am, lose all their power. You set the tone, and if they can't match it, they don't belong in your light. You don't need to shout to raise your standards. You just need to stand firm, rooted in your worth, in your right to be respected. There's a moment when you stop settling for scraps where there should be soul-deep nourishment. And here's the truth that stings. Some people will never see your true worth until you stop laying it out for them without cost. Let them feel what it's like to lose access. Let them sit in the quiet without your energy to feed off of. You're not here to be used, sidelined, or tolerated, and you sure as hell aren't afraid to walk away. Not if it means keeping your peace intact. That's not selfish. That's strength. That's a steady self-awareness. That's the silent fire of someone who knows exactly who they are and what they're done accepting. Because when you finally move with that kind of clarity, everything begins to shift. You stop attracting chaos. You stop explaining your standards. And instead, you begin to pull in the ones who hear you the first time, who look you in the eyes when you speak and would never dare cross the line because they know your presence is sacred. And all of that starts with one bold choice. No more silence in the face of disrespect. Not today, not ever again. Some people will try to call your boundaries arrogance. They'll say your clarity is cold, your truth too uncomfortable. Ignore that noise. You weren't built to live quietly so everyone else could remain undisturbed, because the most alive version of you knows deep down that love without respect is just manipulation wearing a mask. That friendship without loyalty is pure convenience. That leadership without integrity is nothing but control. And the moment you decide you're done accepting less, your entire world starts to move. Your energy shifts. Your confidence expands. You stop apologizing for showing up fully. And suddenly, you see that silence was never a safe place. It was just the waiting room before the storm. But now, you're rising with a voice soaked in truth, with a spine made from boundaries, and a soul that refuses to shrink anymore. Disrespect may come knocking again, but this time, It'll find the door bolted shut because you remembered who you are. Have you ever been in a moment where someone says they love you, but every time they say it, it feels more like a leash than an embrace? That's not love. That's manipulation wearing perfume. That's someone tugging your heartstrings until you dance to their favorite tune. And the worst part, it doesn't hit like a slap. It doesn't scream. It moves softly, wrapped in concern, in affection, in the lie of protection. But underneath it, control. Control over your choices. Control over your confidence. Control over your breath until you're scanning their mood just to exist peacefully. Real love doesn't take your power. Real love hands it back to you. Manipulation locks you in a cage and calls it safety. It whispers that you're not whole without them, and slowly you start believing it. You begin to measure your worth by how much of yourself you can bleed out without asking for anything in return. You call that love, but it's not. It's theft, and it's time to call it what it is. Because love doesn't leave you empty. It doesn't make you doubt your reality. That confusion you feel, that exhaustion, that's not love. That's manipulation, plain and sharp. It shows up when they guilt trip you for setting a boundary, when your need for space becomes betrayal in their eyes, when your effort is twisted into offense, and suddenly you're saying sorry for trying to protect your own peace. Bit by bit, they convince you that love is about sacrifice, that if you're not bleeding, you're not trying hard enough. But real love doesn't weaponize your empathy. Manipulators are artists. They know how to turn passion into chaos. They know how to be both the storm and the umbrella. They'll cut you and then hold you, whispering, "I only do this because I care." That's not care. That's control, dressed in tenderness. That's someone rewriting your reality until you start second-guessing your soul. Don't fall for it. Don't swap your intuition for the illusion of closeness. If the only time someone offers peace is after they've caused pain, that's not love. That's leverage. And watch how manipulators always keep score, but never in your favor. They'll remember every flaw you've ever had, but forget the times they broke you. You keep forgiving because your heart is real, but they turn your love into a weight only you carry. Now you're not loving, you're performing, walking on eggshells, smiling through wounds, swallowing your truth because honesty becomes ammunition. That's not love, that's emotional warfare. Love doesn't twist your mind into knots. Love doesn't ask you to beg for respect. If someone has to cut you down to keep you close, that's not connection. That's fear pretending to be affection. That's not partnership, that's possession. And you were never meant to be possessed. You were meant to be honored the danger. Manipulation feels familiar, especially if you grew up where love had strings, where approval was earned, not given, where affection felt like a trophy, not a truth. So when someone pulls you close, then pushes you away, it feels like home. But don't confuse familiarity with rightness. Don't mistake trauma bonds for love. Don't confuse chaos for connection. And don't let your past whisper that this is all you deserve. Because real love doesn't break you just to keep you. It meets you where you stand and helps you rise. Manipulators know how to make the highs so intoxicating that you forget how deep the lows go. They give just enough warmth to keep you tied. And when you try to leave, they flood you with tears, apologies, promises. Not because they want to grow, but because they want to keep control. They fear losing their grip more than losing you, so they say forever. They say you're my everything, but it's not about love, it's about ownership, because love without respect is a performance, and any performance without truth is a lie. You don't need someone who shows up in pieces. You need someone who's safe in every chapter of your life, not just the moments that suit them. Real love is steady. It doesn't perform. It brings peace. What most people miss is how isolate you, not with locked doors, but with subtle control. It begins with whispers of doubt. Your friends don't get you. Your family's too involved. I'm the only one who understands. At first, it feels intimate, like closeness, but it's not connection, it's control. They want to be the only voice you hear, because if they're the only one you trust, they get to shape your reality, and when all the other voices go quiet, theirs becomes the only one that matters. Soon, you're emotionally alone. You're questioning the people who once held you steady. And when they hurt you, there's no one left to tell you it's not normal. That's not love. That's calculated isolation. The more cut off you are, the easier it becomes to depend on them completely. And once that happens, you lose your compass. You forget where you end and they begin. That's why staying grounded in those who love you for all of you is non-negotiable. Not just the version someone else can control. Real love never cuts the lifelines. It strengthens them. It celebrates your independence. It doesn't fear it. Because love doesn't trap you. Love sets you free. One of the clearest signs of manipulation. It's when your feelings are constantly shut down. You speak your pain, they call you dramatic. You draw a boundary, they call you selfish. You try to explain, and suddenly you're the villain. That's not communication. That's gaslighting. It's the slow dismantling of your trust in your own emotions, until one day, you don't just question what you feel, you question if you're allowed to feel it at all. And when they've stolen that trust, they gain the power to do anything they want, because now you believe you're the broken one. Start seeing yourself as difficult, as lucky that anyone tolerates you, as a burden for simply having needs. But none of that is truth. The truth is this: your emotional sensitivity is not weakness. Your deep capacity to care is not shameful. It is power, and manipulators know it. That's why they try to own it, because a soul that feels deeply, once awakened, becomes unshakable. So guard your truth. Hold your voice like armor. Don't let anyone tell you that feeling deeply is too much. Don't let anyone redefine love into something that hurts you. You're not too emotional. You're just too aware now to be played. One of the cruelest lies manipulation tells is this: it's your fault if you were easier to love, if you weren't so sensitive, if you just let things go. You begin shrinking your light just to keep their shadows undisturbed. But their behavior, that's their choice. Their pain, that's their responsibility. No amount of your sacrifice can turn poison into nourishment. You cannot bleed yourself into being loved. At some point, you have to choose you, not out of anger, but out of survival. You have to look yourself in the mirror and say, I deserve more than just breathing. I deserve more than just making it through the day. Because manipulation keeps you in survival mode, always scanning, always bracing, never resting, never resting. That's not love, that's quiet suffering. And you weren't made to suffer through love. You were meant to live in it, fully, freely, honestly. So don't apologize for waking up. Don't apologize for choosing clarity over chaos. Don't apologize for walking away from anything that tried to break you, then dared to call it care. Now you see it, and that vision is your freedom. Have you ever had someone look you in the eyes and say something didn't happen when you know it did? That moment when your gut screams truth, but their words slice through it until you start wondering, did I imagine that That's gaslighting. That's someone stepping inside your mind and rearranging the furniture until your memories don't fit anymore. It starts with tiny denials, jokes at your expense, laughter when you bring up something serious. You're too sensitive. Relax, it's not that deep. And bit by bit, you begin to shrink. You wonder, am I the problem? Did I make it up? Did I overreact? That's how it spreads, not in one blow, but through 1,000 soft rejections of your truth. Gaslighting doesn't just cloud your thoughts, it shakes the ground beneath them, because once they can make you doubt what's real, they can create a reality for you, one where you need them to interpret the world. They become the narrator of your life, and you're stuck inside a version of the story where you're always wrong, always unstable, always too much. But your truth, it's not meant to be trimmed down for someone else's comfort. It's not up for debate, and anyone who needs to rewrite your story just to hold power over you was never offering love, only possession. Gaslighting is war in whispers. It doesn't scream. That's what makes it lethal. It hides behind, "Are you sure?" Behind, "That's not what I remember." But the message underneath is always the same. You can't trust yourself. And when that message takes root, it doesn't just grow in one corner, it infects everything. You second guess your instincts, your emotions, your decisions, until eventually you silence your own voice and wait for someone else to tell you what's real. And that's the moment it becomes deadly. Because the moment you give someone else the power to define your reality, you give them control over your life, and they will use it. They'll use that control not to love you, not to lift you, but to shrink you, to keep you compliant, to keep you quiet, and the whole time they'll wear the face of concern. "I'm just trying to help," they'll say. But real help doesn't silence you. Real love doesn't erase you. Real love honors the mess and still believes you. Anything else, it's manipulation wearing a smile. Don't fall for the wrapping. You deserve to live where your voice doesn't need armor, where truth doesn't come with a cost. Gaslighting carves the most brutal wound. It turns you into a stranger to your own self. You stop trusting your own heartbeat, your own mind, your own eyes. You could be standing in the rubble, holding the shattered pieces, and still, they'll look at you with calm denial and say, "There's nothing wrong." And the more they repeat it, the more you wonder, maybe it is me. That's how deep the game goes. That's how precisely they play it. And here's the cruel twist. They'll make you feel like you're the one who owes them an apology, as if your pain is the real offense, as if your response to their harm is the problem. That's not love. That's psychological warfare. That's someone hijacking your voice and labeling it too much. Let me remind you, your feelings, they're real. Your story, it happened. Your experience, it counts. If someone makes you fight to be heard, fight to be believed, fight to be respected, that's not love. That's power in disguise. No one should have to muffle themselves just to make someone else comfortable. Gaslighting will have you apologizing for pain you never caused, for emotions you had every right to feel, for boundaries you were forced to draw. It'll have you walking barefoot through broken glass, bleeding in silence, while convincing yourself that this is just how life works. That's when the damage runs deepest, when you start shielding the person who's breaking you because they've convinced you that you're already broken, that you're lucky they're even still around. Let me say this with all the weight it deserves, that is not love. That's captivity with a kiss on the forehead. That's someone dismantling your sanity while whispering you're everything to me. They call you precious as they chip away at your foundation. But love doesn't silence you. Love doesn't erase you. Love doesn't twist your world into something more convenient for them to hold. Your truth is not a suggestion, it's your compass. And anyone trying to steal it isn't trying to love you, they're trying to delete you, because what they're really after is your identity. They want to unravel your self-worth, thread by thread, and at some point, you have to decide that your peace, your truth, your entire existence is more sacred than their comfort. You don't need anyone's permission to stand in who you are. You don't need validation from someone who edits your emotions like they're rewriting your soul. You were there, you felt it, you lived it. When something doesn't sit right in your soul, that's not paranoia, that's intuition. And manipulators despise that quiet voice inside you, because it's the one part of you they can't rewrite. It's that still, sharp instinct that whispers, "This isn't love, this isn't safe, something's wrong," and they will work endlessly to silence it. You're imagining things, you're too emotional. No one else would stay with you, but those aren't truths, they're projections. They're shame dressed up as wisdom, and they've handed it to you like you're supposed to carry it. Let it drop. Because your truth doesn't need to be neat. It doesn't need to come with a bow. It just needs to be yours. And every time you speak it, you take back a piece of what they tried to erase. Every time you believe it, you begin to breathe again. Freedom begins with one decision. I believe me. Not their version, not their watered-down rewrite, just me. There's a special kind of cruelty in being wounded and then told the wound was imagined, as if your reaction, not their betrayal, is the crime. It's like being shoved underwater then, blamed for gasping. That is the grip of gaslighting. It strangles your voice, then dares to call it love. And it hurts worse when it comes from someone you trusted, a partner, a parent, a friend, a person who was supposed to be your shelter. Because when the one who's supposed to protect you becomes the one who's hollowing you out, something inside cracks. But even in the wreckage, they can't kill that spark, that small, sacred flicker, that still knows the truth. It remembers how it really felt. It remembers what was done, and even when it's faint, it still burns. That's your anchor. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not wrong for needing to be seen and needing to be heard. What you are is awake, and once you're awake, you don't go back to sleep. You stop pretending. You stop playing along with their illusion. You leave. You rebuild. Because the truth always finds its way back. You are allowed to rewrite your story, to take back every twisted page, every moment where you were made to doubt your own worth. Gaslighting tried to erase you, but healing lets you write yourself back in. And your voice, when you finally let it rise, isn't loud, it's steady, it's powerful, it's real, and real things don't collapse under pressure. Truth doesn't shatter the moment you stop asking for permission to feel. The moment you stop explaining your pain to people who refuse to understand, that's the moment your power returns. That's how the pattern breaks. That's how healing begins. Not when they admit it, but when you stand in the mirror and say, "I believe you." That's when the lie loses its grip. And that is the moment you rise. Have you ever stood in a room full of people and still felt invisible? That kind of emptiness doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being ignored, overlooked, pushed aside, like you were never really there. That's what long-term neglect does. It doesn't slam doors. It doesn't scream. It starves you in silence, with missed calls, with blank stares, with care that never comes. And after a while, you begin to wonder if maybe your presence doesn't matter at all. Maybe asking to be chosen is asking for too much. That's the quiet lie that neglect whispers into your spirit, that you're too easy to leave, too forgettable to matter, too much work to keep. But hear me now, you are not an afterthought. You are not meant to sit on the shelf waiting to be remembered. You are not meant to be picked up only when it's convenient. You deserve presence, the kind that doesn't need reminders, the kind that shows up because it wants to, not because it has to. You deserve to be someone's first choice, not their backup plan, not the name they dial when everything else falls apart. You deserve to be seen, to be chosen, to be loved out loud. And from this moment on, you never have to settle for anything less. Neglect isn't always loud. Sometimes it comes in the form of silence, in unanswered messages, in broken promises wrapped in sweet intentions. And what it really teaches you is how to tolerate less. When someone repeatedly fails to show up, you begin to fold inward. You soften your voice. You mute your needs. You start to believe that asking is begging, that hoping is too much. You begin to dilute your own presence, thinking maybe if you were easier, quieter, lighter, they'd finally choose you. But the ache doesn't disappear, it deepens, because your soul was never built to survive on emotional scraps. You were never created to beg for affection that arrives late or not at all. And when someone gets comfortable neglecting you, believe them, they're showing you exactly where you stand in their world. Don't explain it away. Don't soften the truth. Because repeated neglect isn't an accident. It's a choice. A choice to ignore your needs, to overlook your heart, to sidestep your worth. You don't have to keep proving that you matter. You already do. If someone can't see that it's not your job to shrink, it's their job to wake up. Because the deepest wound neglect leaves behind isn't just absence. It's the message, you don't matter enough to be missed. That silence, it starts screaming in your chest. It echoes in your mind, twisting your worth into a question mark. Am I too much? Am I not enough? You spiral, but it's a storm that was never yours to weather. That pain, it's what happens when someone takes your consistency for granted. When they treat your loyalty like a guarantee, like you'll always be there, no matter how little they give in return. But love doesn't run on assumption. Love shows up. Strength is not measured by how long you can endure emotional neglect. You are not here to be a cushion for someone who only shows up when it suits them. You are not a pit stop. You are not a placeholder. You are the destination. If someone treats you like you're convenient but never essential, they do not deserve the wholeness of your love. Because love doesn't vanish and return at will. Love is presence. It is steady. It stays. And maybe the most dangerous part of neglect is how normal it starts to feel. You adjust. You celebrate crumbs. A delayed reply becomes a victory. A conversation feels like a connection. You start calling starvation a feast. But deep down, you know, love is not supposed to leave you anxious. Love is not supposed to vanish when you need it most. And still, so many of us stay. We wait, we hope, we believe maybe, just maybe, one day they'll realize what they're losing. But every day you wait for them to choose you is a day you betray yourself. Every night you spend questioning your worth because they couldn't see it is a night you abandon your own heart. Let me make this clear. You are not asking for too much. You are not hard to love. You are not a burden. Anyone who makes love feel like something you have to earn isn't offering love. They're offering convenience, and convenience is never enough. What makes neglect so sharp is that it rarely comes from strangers. It comes from the people who promised they'd never leave. From friends, from family, from lovers who looked you in the eyes and said, "I care," and then they drift. Without warning, without explanation, and the silence they leave behind feels like a betrayal wrapped in confusion, so you question yourself. You retrace every step, every word, every breath, trying to find what you did wrong. But sometimes the failure isn't yours. Sometimes they just aren't capable of loving with the depth you offer. And yes, letting go hurts, but holding on to someone who never held you in return, that breaks you piece by piece. You can't keep burning yourself down just to keep someone else warm. You can't keep handing your heart to people who don't even know how to hold it. Your love deserves effort, consistency, care. Stop pleading for someone to stay. If they wanted to, they already would have, and if they won't, you owe it to yourself to stop waiting. There's a quiet power in choosing to no longer be an afterthought, in recognizing that your worth is not defined by who sees it, but by the fact that it exists. You do not need to chase. You do not need to beg. You do not need to bend yourself into smaller shapes to earn what should be given freely. Real love isn't a performance. It's presence. It's reverence. And from this moment forward, that's the only kind you will accept. If someone cannot respect the truth of who you are, they haven't earned the right to stand beside you. Not your time, not your energy, not the fire you carry in your chest. You've lived through too much, battled through too many storms, to keep offering your soul to those who barely look up to notice it, and walking away from that kind of neglect. It hurts. Of course it does. Because you held on for so long, hoping your love would be enough to wake them up. But walking away isn't weakness. It's not quitting. It's clarity. It's finally recognizing that staying in places where you're invisible is not loyalty, it's abandonment. But this time, it's you abandoning yourself. And that ends now. You weren't made to shrink, just to fit inside someone else's limited view. You weren't made to be a backup plan. You are not someone's maybe, you are someone's miracle. The right ones will not only see your worth, they'll meet it, they'll match it. Not with hollow words, but with presence, with consistency, with actions that say, I see you, I choose you. Not just when it's easy, always. You deserve more than pretty apologies. You deserve commitment. You deserve to be met, not managed. Because the moment you stop settling for being treated like you're optional, you start creating space for the love you were always meant to receive, the kind that doesn't fear your light, but reflects it back brighter. Let me be clear, your heart is a gift, your time is sacred, your attention is valuable, and they are not obligations, they are offerings, and anyone who treats them carelessly has no place at your table. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival, and yet you've probably felt it before. You share your wins, and their smile doesn't quite reach their eyes. You feel the chill beneath the applause. You hear the shift in their tone, like your joy somehow makes them uncomfortable. That's not in your head, that's envy wearing a friend's face. And it hurts the most when it comes from someone you thought was safe. Because when you rise, you expect your people to rise with you. But not everyone is clapping when the light finds you. Some only stood close to you in the shadows because it helped them feel tall. And when your light shines too brightly, it reminds them of everything they haven't allowed themselves to become. That's not friendship. That's quiet resentment. That's competition wrapped in concern. And what stings isn't just their reaction, it's the realization that you've been rooting for someone who was secretly hoping you'd never bloom. Because real friends don't disappear when you succeed. They amplify your light. They shine with you. But jealousy, it's subtle. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It sounds like backhanded compliments, like jokes that sting, like silences when you share good news, like the way the conversation changes the moment your growth takes up too much space. At first, you excuse it. You tell yourself they're tired, distracted, that maybe it's you. But patterns speak louder than denial. The people meant for you will never ask you to dim. They will never shrink in your light. They will stand taller beside it. And if you're constantly softening yourself just to protect someone else's comfort, then that's not friendship. That's silent warfare. Because love doesn't compete. It doesn't withhold applause. It doesn't fall quiet when you rise. Love celebrates. And sometimes the hardest truth is realizing the people who held your hand in the dark don't know how to hold your hand in the light. They were fine when you needed their strength, when your voice trembled and your path was uncertain. But once you stood steady, once you owned your worth out loud, their support got quieter. Their laughter felt different, and you started wondering if the love you trusted was ever really love or just comfort in your brokenness. Losing someone who once felt like family hurts, but holding on to someone who resents your glow hurts more, because that's the kind of pain that doesn't scream, it drains. It doesn't break you all at once. It erodes you silently. You deserve people who fuel your fire, not people who flinch when it gets too bright. And if your joy ever makes someone uncomfortable, let it. If your light unsettles those who were only comfortable with your shadows, so be it. You didn't come this far to fold yourself back into the version of you that made them feel safe. Let them go. Let the silence grow if it must, because in that silence, you'll finally hear your own voice again. And in that voice, you'll remember who you were before you started shrinking, and you'll never forget it again. They'll tell you not to get ahead of yourself, that they're just worried for you. But listen closely, that's not concern, that's comparison in disguise. And it's not your job to shrink so someone else can feel tall. It's not your responsibility to manage someone else's jealousy. You were not born to dim your light just so their insecurities feel safe in the dark. You fought too hard for your joy to apologize for it now. Anyone who makes you feel guilty for growing has no place at the table you built. Some people won't clap for you, not because you don't deserve it, but because your rise reminds them of everything they refused to become. And they'll dress it up as wisdom, as friendly advice. But if it sounds like resistance, it probably is. They're not guiding you, they're guarding their comfort. Because you're moving at the pace of your purpose, and that scares people who never left the start line. Real friends don't just cheer for you when it's easy. They walk beside you when the path gets steep. They don't offer umbrellas in the storm. They hold your hand through it. And the loudest betrayal isn't the one who leaves. It's the one who stays just to keep you small. The one who lingers not to lift you, but to make sure you never soar beyond their reach. It's subtle, it's quiet. It shows up in backhanded comments, tight-lipped smiles, questions that feel like warnings. But every time they chip away at your self-belief, your spirit starts to wonder if maybe they're right. That's the poison of envy. It doesn't always try to destroy you. Sometimes it just wants to contain you. But your light was never meant to be boxed in. The moment you stop apologizing for your ambition, for your joy, for your evolution, that's the moment the right people find you. The ones who don't flinch when the spotlight lands on you. The ones who don't measure your success against their own but lift it higher because your win feels like there's 2 dots. And if you haven't found them yet, wait. Don't settle for lukewarm support just to fill the silence. Don't keep shallow company just because you're tired of being alone. You're not here to babysit fragile egos or wrap your power in soft packaging. You're here to grow, to expand, to rise. And the ones who matter won't be threatened by your light. They'll reflect it back. Let the rest fall away. Because lukewarm loyalty isn't loyalty at all. Polite envy is still envy. You deserve love that lifts without limit, that doesn't flinch when you shine, that doesn't get quieter when you succeed. That's not asking too much. That's the bare minimum. And here's what too many kind souls forget. Kindness isn't weakness. It isn't an open door for people to walk through whenever they please. It doesn't mean giving endlessly while getting crumbs in return. But many will treat it like that, because they assume love without boundaries is theirs to control. But your kindness isn't a flaw, it's a force, a gift, and it's time you protect it like one. Because there's a difference between being kind and being used, and too often we learn it the hard way, when they only show up with empty hands. When they vanish the second you need something back, that's not love, that's convenience. And when they treat your compassion like a service, it leaves you hollow. You are not a backup plan, not someone's emergency contact, not a bottomless well for people who only come to drink when they're dry. You've given enough to people who never gave anything back, who praised your patience but never earned your presence. They don't want your heart, they want what it gives. And you've been giving for too long, hoping it would make them see your worth, but they won't. Not until you stop handing it out like proof. Not until you start keeping some of it for yourself. Because your love shouldn't leave you empty. Your giving shouldn't cost your peace. If someone only sees your value in what you do for them, they never saw you at all. That's not love. That's exploitation. And yes, saying no will feel foreign at first. Drawing lines will feel sharp. But boundaries are not cruelty. They are clarity. And the people who truly love you will never be offended by your limits. Only the ones who benefited from your silence will call it too much. You can be soft and still say, enough. You can care deeply and still close the door. Because when kindness becomes a leash, it's no longer love, it's self-neglect. And if someone only sticks around because you were easy to take from, their exit is your freedom. Let them go. Protect your peace like your life depends on it. Because in many ways, it does. Guard your energy like the sacred thing it is. Give your heart, but don't offer it as proof. Share your light, but don't let it blind you to who's standing in your shadow. And when you finally start loving yourself, the way you've always loved others, the ones who truly care won't resist. They'll rise to meet you, because real love doesn't shrink you, it doesn't drain you, it doesn't turn your goodness into a burden. It honors you, so hold your truth. Draw your lines. Let your no be as holy as your yes. And walk forward, not harder, just wiser. You're not bitter. You're becoming. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not heartless. You're healing. And if that makes the wrong people uncomfortable, let it. Because your life begins the moment you decide to stop breaking for people who never planned to build with you. And that moment is now.